She had always liked sitting by the window on airplanes. For her, flying felt peaceful. It was one of the few places where her mind stayed calm. She was a quiet college student, traveling home after a long week of exams. Her bag was small, her headphones were old, and her eyes looked tired. No one on the aircraft noticed her. She looked like any other young traveler trying to reach home before the weekend. The plane was full, but the cabin felt relaxed. People chatted softly. Flight attendants moved down the aisle checking seatbelts, and the engines hummed like a steady lullaby. She leaned back in her seat, breathing slowly. She had no idea her ordinary flight was about to test every part of her courage. About 20 minutes after takeoff, a slight shake ran through the plane. It was nothing serious, just the kind of movement that usually came from light wind. A few passengers looked around, but the student stayed calm. The shake passed quickly, and everything seemed normal again. She returned to her book, underlining a phrase she wanted to remember for an assignment later. Then another sound came. A soft, strange beep. Not loud enough for most passengers to hear, but sharp enough to catch her attention. She paused, lifted her head, and listened. One of the flight attendants also seemed to notice, glancing toward the front of the aircraft. Something about her expression made the student feel uneasy. She tried to ignore it, reminding herself that airplanes were full of noises. But the uneasy feeling stayed. Her heart beat a little faster, though she couldn't explain why. 10 minutes later, the cabin speakers cracked. A burst of static came through, followed by a voice she didn't expect to sound so tense. It was the captain's voice, but he did not sound steady the way pilots usually do. His words came quickly, almost heavy, and the entire cabin went silent as everyone listened. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We have a situation in the cockpit." People stopped moving. Even children froze. The college student felt her stomach tighten. The captain continued, his voice shaking now as if he was fighting for control. "We've lost the pilot." The cabin filled with gasps. Someone whispered, "What does that mean?" Another person pressed the call button. A few passengers looked toward the cockpit door, as if expecting someone to walk out. The student felt a cold wave move through her body. Lost the pilot? Had he fainted? Did he collapse? Was he sick? She tried to breathe slowly, steadying her hands against her seat. She didn't want to panic, and she didn't want to imagine the worst. But the fear in the captain's voice told her this was not a small problem. A flight attendant rushed forward, speaking quietly into her radio. Another one moved to calm a woman who had started crying. The student watched, feeling like her heart was beating in her throat. She had never seen flight attendants look so serious. The captain's voice returned. "Our co-pilot is attempting to stabilize the aircraft, but we need medical assistance immediately. If anyone on board has medical or aviation experience, please make yourself known." No one moved. Everyone looked around, hoping someone else would stand. The student waited too, but the silence stayed. She wished someone would rise, someone older, someone confident, someone who knew exactly what to do, but no one did. The student closed her eyes for a moment. Her breathing slowed as her thoughts shifted. She remembered something she rarely talked about, something she kept quiet during college, because it didn't fit the life she had now. Before choosing her current field, she had spent years watching her father training in flight simulations. She had grown up listening to emergency procedures, cockpit checklists, and pilot instructions like they were bedtime stories. She had practiced them beside him, copying his movements, trying to learn everything she could. She had never told her classmates. Most people assumed she was just shy, maybe a little bookish. They didn't know she had once dreamed of becoming a pilot. Herself, life had changed things, but the lessons had stayed inside her. And now, hearing the captain's breaking voice, those lessons came back like a forgotten memory. Waking up. Another beep echoed through the cabin. The plane dipped slightly, not enough to throw anyone, but enough to make everyone hold their seats. A man shouted, "Someone help them!" A woman whispered a prayer. The air felt heavier with each second. The students' hands trembled, but she forced them to stop. She swallowed hard. She didn't know if she was ready for something like this. She didn't know if stepping forward was the right thing. But she knew one thing clearly: no one else was moving, and the cockpit needed someone. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. Passengers around her looked at her in surprise, wondering what a quiet young girl could possibly do at a moment like this. She didn't answer their questions. She simply stood up, her heart pounding. Her steps shaky but determined. She walked toward the front of the aircraft, and the entire cabin watched in silence, not knowing that the quiet college student might be the only hope they had. The moment. She reached the front of the cabin. She felt every pair of eyes behind her waiting, hoping, fearing. She could feel the pressure on her shoulders like a physical weight. A flight attendant stepped into her path, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to stay professional. "Yes? Do you need something?" the attendant asked, trying to understand why this quiet young girl had stood up. The student hesitated for only a heartbeat. I can help," she said softly. "I'm not a doctor, but I know aviation procedures. My father trained pilots. I grew up learning the same emergency checklists." The attendant stared at her in surprise. She clearly didn't expect such words from someone who looked young and fragile. But the student's voice carried something else: clarity, a quiet strength, the kind that appears only when fear and courage collide. Before the attendant could respond, the cockpit radio crackled again, this time louder. The co-pilot's voice came through, strained and breathless. "Captain, I need assistance now." His pulse is weak. Static cut the voice for a moment. "And the aircraft is drifting. I can't stabilize without help." The flight attendant's eyes widened. Without wasting another second, she grabbed the student's wrist gently. "Come with me." Passengers gasped as the cockpit door, usually never opened during flight, unlocked from inside. The attendant pushed the student forward quickly. The student stepped into a world she had only seen in childhood memories, a world filled with blinking lights, narrow space, and the deep vibration of engines around her. The co-pilot looked young too, barely older than her. Sweat covered his forehead, and his hands gripped the controls tightly as he tried to fight the aircraft's slow tilt. The captain lay slumped to the side, unconscious, breathing shallowly. His face looked pale, almost gray. The student froze for a second. She had imagined many emergencies while practicing with her father, but seeing it real was different, terrifying, real. Heavy. The co-pilot snapped his head toward her. "Who are you? Are you medical?" She shook her head. "I can help you with procedures. I know checklists. I know how to assist a pilot." For a moment, he stared at her like he wasn't sure if he should trust her. But he didn't have time to doubt. The plane rattled again, a deeper vibration this time, and alarms began flashing across the main display screen. The co-pilot's voice dropped low. "Fine, stand here. Don't touch anything unless I say." She nodded quickly and stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the instrument panel. She recognized more than she expected: altitude warnings, attitude indicators, engine readouts. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, teaching her what each light meant, how to stay calm when something didn't look right. Another alarm rang. The plane dipped. Passengers screamed behind the closed door. The co-pilot tightened his grip. "Read me the emergency assist checklist. Section 3, loss of primary control support." Her breath caught. She remembered that exact checklist. The words came almost naturally. "Confirm co-pilot control," she said. "Confirmed. Check hydraulic pressure. Pressure is low but stable. Check autopilot assist." "Autopilot's fighting me," he said through clenched teeth. I need manual override. She nodded quickly. Then release secondary stabilizer lock. He shot her a look. You know this system? I told you, she whispered. I learned from someone who taught pilots. He gave her a fast nod. Okay, do it. Her hands moved carefully, slow, steady, controlled. She found the stabilizer switch and released the lock exactly as she had seen countless times in training. Videos at home. The moment she did, the controls loosened slightly in the co-pilot's hands. He let out a shaky breath. Good. That helps. The student didn't smile. She stayed focused, eyes scanning, ready for the next instruction. Behind her, a flight attendant pressed 2 fingers gently against the captain's neck. His pulse is still weak, she said. We need to land soon, or he might not make it. The co-pilot swallowed hard. We're still too far from the nearest airport. And with only one pilot conscious. His voice faded, doubt slipping into every word. The student stepped closer to the center console without thinking. You're not alone right now, she said quietly. Tell me what to read next. The co-pilot blinked, almost surprised by her confidence. Then he nodded again, this time with a kind of trust forming between them. Emergency Level Assist Checklist Section 6, he said. She started reading again, guiding him through each line. Together, they stabilized the plane bit by bit. The shaking reduced. The alarms stopped one by one. For the first time since she stepped inside, the cockpit felt less like a falling world and more like a place where hope could still breathe. But just when she thought things were improving, a new alert flashed bright red across the main screen. Weather system detected. Severe turbulence ahead. The co-pilot whispered. No, not now. The student felt her stomach tighten again. Outside the window, clouds thickened like giant walls waiting to swallow the aircraft. Inside the cockpit, no one spoke, everyone felt. The air shifting. Everyone understood something unspoken. Their real fight was only just beginning. The first hit of turbulence came like a silent punch. The plane didn't shake. It lurched. Not wildly, but sudden enough that the student had to brace one hand on the cockpit wall to keep her balance. The co-pilot gripped the controls tighter, his eyes fixed on the storm building ahead. Through the windshield, endless towers of dark. Clouds rose like mountains in the sky, shifting and twisting as if alive. For a moment, the entire aircraft felt weightless. Then it dropped again, sharper this time. A few frightening screams came from the cabin. She heard a tray crash somewhere. Behind the closed door. The co-pilot exhaled through his teeth. This storm wasn't on our initial path. It's growing fast. She watched the radar screen. The green patch of turbulence shifted into yellow, then red, thick red. Her heart thumped heavily inside her chest. Her father's voice echoed in her memory again. Storms don't scare good pilots. Unprepared pilots scare themselves. She swallowed. She was not a pilot. But she wasn't unprepared either, not now, not after everything she had learned. The co-pilot spoke quickly. I need you to read the turbulence penetration protocol. She scanned the panel, found the right checklist, and began reading. Her voice stayed steady even as the plane dipped again. Reduce speed to recommended turbulence velocity. Reducing. He answered, maintain winds level. I'm trying. Another shake, harder than before, rattled the cockpit. One of the oxygen masks above the captain swung slightly. The machine beeps around them rose into a warning chorus. She stepped closer. To the co-pilot. Tell me what you need, I'm here. His eyes flickered toward her. I need someone calm. You're calm. Keep reading. She nodded and continued. But in the middle of her next sentence, the plane suddenly rolled to the left, far sharper than anything before. The cockpit tilted so hard she had to grab the back of the co-pilot's chair. Passengers screamed again, louder this time. Fear rising like heat through the aircraft. The co-pilot fought the controls. Muscles tensed, jaw locked, sweat rolled down his cheek. Come on, hold. Hold. The student looked at the panel and noticed a flashing indicator she recognized. Her father had explained it many times. It was the crosswind drift monitor, showing that the storm's winds were pushing the aircraft sideways, forcing the plane into a slide. Heavy side winds, she said quickly. Angle your nose 2 degrees right. Counterdrift. He blinked in surprise. You know drift correction? My father taught me everything he could. Just trust me. He adjusted the controls. Slowly, painfully slowly, the aircraft leveled. The plane still shook, but it was no longer rolling. The co-pilot exhaled. That actually worked. The student didn't smile, but relief washed through her chest. What next? Check our altitude, he said. She glanced at the screen. Her breath caught. We're losing altitude fast. He checked it himself and froze for a second. The storm's downdraft is pushing us down. The aircraft shuddered again, dropping as though invisible hands were pulling it downward. Cupboards rattled. A loud thud echoed from the cabin. Someone yelled for help. The co-pilot pressed buttons rapidly. We need more thrust. But that will shake the aircraft harder, she warned. Yes, he said, but the alternative is worse. He increased thrust. The engines roared louder, vibrating through the cockpit floor. The descent slowed, but didn't stop. She stared at the storm clouds swirling ahead. The plane looked like a small bird trying to fly through a dark ocean. We need a way out of this storm, she whispered. I know, he said. But with one pilot down and limited control, we're almost out of options. The captain groaned. Weakly, the flight attendant checked him again, fear growing in her eyes. His breathing is getting slower. The student felt a cold shiver run through her. They didn't just need to save the passengers. They needed to save the captain too. She leaned over the radar. Wait, look. The co-pilot followed her gaze. A thin gap between the thickest red patches, a small corridor of less severe turbulence. It's narrow, he said, but it's our only path, she replied. He hesitated. The gap was barely wide enough for an aircraft to slip through. One wrong angle and they would hit the worst part of the storm. If we go through there, she continued softly, we have a chance. If we stay here, we lose altitude until we cannot recover. The choice wasn't easy, but it was clear. The co-pilot tightened his grip on the controls. Hold on. We're going for it. The student steadied herself beside him, bracing her. Hands against the panel, the aircraft turned gradually toward the narrow corridor of calmer sky. The winds fought them, pushing, pulling, dragging them sideways like a giant, invisible force trying to deny them escape. The student read every support step she remembered. Voice steady, heart loud, maintain pitch, correct drift. Watch vertical. Speed, watch angle of attack. The plane rattled as they entered the narrow path. The turbulence hit hard again, violent this time, slamming the cabin left and right. Overhead compartments shook. Someone screamed loudly behind the door, but they kept moving forward. The co-pilot held the controls with everything he had. Come on, just a little more. The corridor ahead opened slightly. The red patches thinned. The clouds softened. From violent gray to pale white, then suddenly, the shaking stopped almost completely. The aircraft broke through into clearer air. The student gasped softly. The co-pilot leaned back, exhausted, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. Beautiful, fragile silence. But before they had time to rest, a new message appeared on the screen. Fuel imbalance detected. The student felt her heart drop. The storm had damaged one of the tanks, and their new fight was about to begin. Asterisk, the warning appeared in bright red, but it was the small vibration under her feet that truly froze her. It wasn't the shaking of turbulence this time. It was different, uneven, almost like the aircraft was limping in the sky. She stepped closer to the console, her eyes scanning the alert. Fuel imbalance detected. Her breath tightened. A fuel imbalance meant one engine was burning fuel faster than the other, or worse, one tank was losing fuel due to damage. If not corrected, the plane could tilt, lose control, or even stall. The co-pilot stared at the warning with disbelief. This storm, it hit the left tank harder than I thought. The student felt the weight of the words. The left tank losing fuel meant the aircraft was slowly becoming unbalanced, heavy on one side, lighter on the other. An aircraft couldn't fly like that for long. We need to isolate the tank, she said quietly. He looked at her again, now with a mixture of fear and trust. You know how to do that? She nodded once. My father taught me. It's not common for a passenger plane to need manual isolation, but the process is similar to what he showed me. Another small tilt passed through the aircraft, enough to make the captain's oxygen mask sway and the flight attendant catch her balance. Behind the cockpit door, the cabin reacting sounded like waves, voices rising, whispers breaking, a child crying softly. The student felt a responsibility she had never known before. Every voice behind that door belonged to someone she might save or lose. The co-pilot moved his trembling fingers to the fuel control panel. Tell me exactly what to do. She leaned in, pointing carefully. Close the cross-feed valve first. That keeps the good tank from losing balance. He turned the switch. The indicator light shifted from green to amber. Now isolate the left tank main feed, she said. Cut off the leak path, he hesitated. Once I cut it. We're running mostly on the right side. Yes, she answered. But it keeps the plane stable enough to reach somewhere safe. He exhaled heavily and flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing happened. The warning stayed red. The imbalance numbers kept shifting. Her heart sank. Then the readings slowed, then stabilized slightly. Good, she whispered. We stopped the worst of it. But the co-pilot didn't relax. We still have a problem. We won't have enough fuel to reach our planned airport. She stared at him. How far are we? Farther than our tank allows now, he said. We need to find an alternate landing spot. She checked the navigation screen. Nearest airstrip? He zoomed in. The nearest airport was too small for a jet of their size under normal conditions. That runway is short, he said. We'd need a perfect approach, and we only have one conscious pilot. The student looked down at her shaking hands. She wasn't a pilot. She wasn't trained to land an aircraft. But she wasn't here by accident either. She felt that deeply now. Something life, fate, chance had placed her in seat 14A for a reason. The captain groaned again. The flight attendant leaned closer. His breathing is worse. He needs medical help soon. The student turned to the co-pilot. We have no other choice. We try the small airstrip. He looked at her with exhausted eyes. Then I'll need your help more than ever. Landing alone with a weak fuel load is nearly impossible. She swallowed. I'll do everything you tell me. His hands steadied on the controls, as though her words grounded him. Then let's prepare for approach. But before they could begin, a sudden knock hit the cockpit door sharp. Frightened, a flight attendant called through it softly. People are panicking. They want to know what's happening. Some think we're going down. The co-pilot closed his eyes briefly. I can't make an announcement right now. The student placed a hand on the door gently. Let me. She opened the small intercom and spoke into it, her voice soft but clear. Everyone, please stay calm. We are navigating out of a storm, and the co-pilot is working hard. The captain is receiving care. We have a plan, and we are moving toward a safe landing. Please stay seated and trust us. The cabin went quiet. Her few calming words were enough to cool the fear, at least for a moment. She felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just a frightened passenger. She was part of the crew now, whether she wanted it or not. Co-pilot glanced at her with quiet gratitude. "Thank you." That helped. She turned back to the controls. "Tell me what's next." "We need to start descent," he said. "A gentle one. We don't want to burn extra fuel." She watched him adjust the throttle and gently lower the aircraft's nose. The horizon tilted slightly, the clouds parting to reveal a faint line of green and brown land far below. The student's pulse quickened. That land might be their last chance. The co-pilot read the readings again. "If the fuel drop stays steady, we can make it." Barely, barely. The word chilled her. Then something else flashed on the screen. "Crosswind warning, runway affected." Her heart dropped. The small airstrip didn't just have a short runway, it had dangerous winds blowing across it. She looked at the co-pilot. He looked back at her. Both understood immediately. Even if they reached the airstrip alive, landing there would be its own battle. The first view of the runway came like a thin scratch against the ground, so small, so distant, it looked almost unreal. The student stared through the windshield, her breath caught somewhere between fear and hope. The co-pilot leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as the storm clouds behind them slowly faded into a dull gray curtain. But the wind didn't fade with them. The plane jerked suddenly to the right, the force strong enough that she had to grip the seat beside her. A warning chime sounded again, this time sharper, insisting, "Crosswind detected. Direction unstable." The co-pilot muttered under his breath. "These winds are stronger than reported." The student steadied her breath. "What do you need me to do?" He didn't answer immediately. He was thinking, fast, hard, pushing through exhaustion. "We need to set up for a crosswind landing. But this runway is short, narrow, and surrounded by uneven terrain." She understood the unspoken meaning. Even trained pilots avoided landings like this. And now they were attempting it with one pilot unconscious and a college student standing in the cockpit. The plane drifted sideways again. He fought it back, muscles tightening in his arms. She scanned the controls. "Tell me what to monitor." "Watch our speed. If it drops too low, we stall. If it climbs too high, we overshoot." She nodded. "Angle of approach?" He took a shaky breath. "I'll have to do a crab approach. Tilt the nose into the wind, then straighten at the last second." She had seen her father demonstrate it on a simulator. It looked elegant there. In real life, it felt like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. "We're going to get pushed around until the final flare," he added. The student gripped the panel. "We can do this." He glanced at her again, tired, afraid, but not alone. The aircraft dipped slightly as he adjusted the flaps. Outside, the land below grew clearer. Small fields, a row of distant trees. No big city, no second option. This airstrip was everything now. Another jolt hit the plane, harder this time. Luggage from the cabin slammed against compartments. A baby cried loudly. Someone yelled words she couldn't hear clearly through the door. Her heart squeezed. She wished she could tell every passenger she was trying her best. The co-pilot's voice rose. "Speed check." She checked the display. A little high. Reducing throttle. The engine softened. The plane dipped again. The runway came closer, still small, still frightening. A gust of wind slammed from the right. The plane tilted. She grabbed the side rails. The co-pilot grunted. "Come on. Stay with me." She scanned rapidly. Correct 2 degrees left. Drift increasing. He turned the controls. The plane leveled, but only barely. The runway was now in full view. Thin gray strip. A chance. A risk. A hope. The co-pilot whispered. "This is going to be rough." The student nodded. "Tell me the next step." "Final checklist," he said. "Call out everything you see. Altitude, vertical speed, drift, throttle." She began calling the numbers in steady rhythm. He responded with adjustments, small, quick, precise. The teamwork between them grew stronger with every second. Altitude falling. wind shifting. Speed adjusting. One step at a time, they built a path toward the ground. But the storm wasn't finished with them yet. Just as they lined up with the runway, the plane lurched again so violently her knees buckled. The co-pilot's hand slipped for a moment. The nose swung slightly off course. The student reacted without thinking. Nose right, restrict now. He pulled the controls sharply. The plane aligned again, but the runway was rushing toward them fast. Speed? He asked. She checked. Still good. Altitude? Dropping steady. He exhaled. Brace. This will not be smooth. The student grabbed the rail. The flight attendant behind her held the captain's seat tightly, trying not to fall. The landing lights flickered across the cockpit. Almost there. Almost out. The wind hit again sideways. Sudden, cruel. The plane slid. She felt her heart jump into her throat. Drift correction. 3 degrees left. The co-pilot responded instantly. His arms shook, but his focus stayed razor sharp. The ground rose fast outside the window. 30 feet. 20, 10, he shouted. Straighten now. He pulled the rudder pedals. The plane leveled for a split second, just enough. The wheels hit the runway with a violent crash. The entire aircraft bounced. Everyone screamed. The plane slammed down again, harder, but this time the wheels gripped the concrete. The co-pilot pushed the brakes, fighting the remaining wind. The student felt the aircraft skid slightly to the side, but then miraculously it straightened. The engines roared into reverse. The runway rushed under them. Slowing, until finally the plane shuddered to a full stop. Silence. Deep, fragile silence. The co-pilot leaned forward, chest heaving, eyes watering from the pressure he had held inside. The student let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. They had landed, but before relief could settle, a new realization hit them both at the same moment. They were stranded on a small rural airstrip, with an unconscious captain, and no emergency crew waiting for them. This landing was only the end of one danger. Another was already waiting. For a long moment, no one moved. The plane sat silent on the narrow runway, engines cooling, metal ticking softly as it settled. The student stood still, feeling the trembling in her legs return now that the danger had paused. The co-pilot kept his hands on the controls, as if afraid the aircraft might suddenly leap back into the sky. Then a single sound broke the silence. Someone in the cabin began to sob, softly at first, then openly, overwhelmed by the miracle of being alive. The student looked at the co-pilot. He looked back at her. Neither spoke, but both understood they had crossed through something few people ever face. Still, there was no time to breathe. The flight attendant rushed to the captain again. He's fading, she said, voice shaking. He needs help now. The co-pilot unbuckled slowly. We need to get everyone off the plane. And we need emergency medical support immediately. He opened the cockpit door. Passengers stared at him, some with fear, some with gratitude, some still too shocked to feel anything at all. The student stepped out behind him, and a wave of whispers filled the cabin. That girl was helping in the cockpit. She was the one reading the controls. She saved us. She lowered her eyes, uncomfortable with the attention. She had not helped for praise. She had stepped forward because no one else did, because something inside her refused to let people suffer while she remained seated. The co-pilot raised his voice gently. Everyone, please remain calm. We have landed safely. We will disembark shortly. A man called out, Is the captain okay? The co-pilot hesitated. The student stepped in quietly. We're doing everything we can for him. Please stay patient. That calmed him again. He leaned closer to her and whispered, We need ground support. But I can't see any vehicles or crew here. She looked out the window. The small airstrip stretched into open fields. No buildings, no control tower, no ambulance, no emergency staff. How does an airstrip operate without personnel? She whispered. It's an unmanned strip, he replied. Used mostly for small private planes. They don't keep staff here. Her heart dropped. Then they were truly on their own. Passengers began gathering their things. A woman clutched her child, trembling. Another man held the seat in front of him, too weak to stand. The student walked down the aisle, speaking softly to calm people, helping an elderly person reach the exit. She wasn't a flight attendant, but in that moment, she acted like one. Outside, the wind had softened. The storm behind them looked far away now, like a monster they had barely escaped. But the ground felt too quiet. The emptiness of the airstrip scared her more than the clouds. The co-pilot and two attendants carefully lifted the captain from his seat. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale. The student held the cockpit door open, worry twisting inside her. We need to call emergency services, she said urgently. Already. Trying, a flight attendant answered, holding a radio. Signal here is weak. The co-pilot turned to the student. Your phone? She checked. No service. Not even one bar. Passengers also raised their phones, confused murmurs filling the air. No network. No data. Nothing. We landed in a dead zone, she said quietly. A cold realization settled over the cabin. Getting the plane down was only half the fight. Now they had to keep the captain alive until help arrived, and help had no idea where they were. The co-pilot surveyed the surroundings. There should be a small service shed somewhere past the runway. Maybe there's a landline. The student stepped forward immediately. I'll go with you. He shook his head. It might be unsafe. The ground is uneven. Debris from storms. She interrupted gently. You can't carry the captain and search for help. You need someone who can move fast and stay steady. I can do that. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Okay, but stay close. As they stepped out of the plane, the wind brushed against them, cold and sharp. The air carried the faint smell of wet earth, evidence of recent rain. She followed him toward the edge of the airstrip. Behind them, passengers watched nervously. The flight attendants stayed inside with the captain, doing everything they could to keep him conscious. Every step felt heavier than the last. The students' shoes sank slightly into patches of soft mud. A piece of broken tree lay across their path, likely thrown there by the storm. The co-pilot stepped over it, and she followed without hesitation. After 100 meters, they spotted a structure, a small metal shed with a faded sign. It looked old, almost abandoned. Inside they found dust, a broken chair, and a wall panel that might have once held emergency equipment. But the room was empty now. No radio. No first aid kit. Nothing useful. The co-pilot clenched his jaw. There has to be something. A landline. Line. No first aid kit. Nothing useful. The co-pilot clenched his jaw. There has to be something. A landline. A power box. Anything. She scanned the room, her heart racing. Then she noticed a small wooden cabinet in the corner. What about that? He hurried to it. The door creaked open. Inside hope. An old hand-crank emergency radio. The co-pilot grabbed it swiftly. If this works, we can contact regional air traffic. He brushed off the dust and began turning the crank, building the charge. The device crackled weakly. He adjusted dials, nerves tightening with every second. No signal. He tried again. Nothing. The student's chest tightened. Keep trying. He turned the crank harder, pushing through exhaustion. Finally a small beep, then a faint static voice. Her breath caught. The co-pilot leaned in, raising his voice. This is Flight 613, emergency landing, medical critical. Request immediate support. Silence. Then a clearer reply. Flight 613. We hear you. Send coordinates. The co-pilot's eyes filled with relief. We can do this. But before he could answer, The radio flickered and died. The students stared at the dead radio. They had only one chance left. Find a way to power it again. Before time ran out for the captain, the radio lay silent on the dusty floor, its small screen dim, its brief spark of hope gone. For a moment, neither the student nor the co-pilot spoke. The quiet pressed in on them, heavy and cold. Somewhere across the runway, the plane waited with dozens of frightened passengers and a captain whose faint breaths were running out of time. The student knelt beside the dead radio and touched it gently. It felt warm from the crank but powerless. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to think the way her father taught her whenever they faced a problem in the simulator. Machines don't fail without telling you why. He used to say, "Look for what they need." She opened the radio's back panel. The co-pilot watched her, surprised, but he didn't stop her. Wires, dust, and an old battery pack sat inside. She tapped the battery lightly. "This is holding a charge, but it's leaking. The crank is charging it, but it isn't storing enough power to keep the signal. So we need another power source," the co-pilot said. She nodded. "Something steady. Something that can give us a burst strong enough to reconnect." He looked toward the plane. "There's only one place we might find something like that." They ran back across the field toward the aircraft. The wind tugged at their clothes, and the muddy ground slowed their steps, but the urgency pushed them forward. When they climbed back inside the cabin, passengers looked at them with desperate eyes, hoping they brought good news. The student shook her head softly. "Not yet." The captain still lay at the front, his breathing shallow. A flight attendant whispered, "His pulse is thready. Please, hurry." The co-pilot opened a storage compartment near the cockpit. Some aircraft carry portable power units for maintenance tools. He dug through equipment cables, manuals, spare covers. Finally something. A compact auxiliary power pack. He held it up, breathless. "If we can connect this to the radio, we might get one last signal." The student grabbed it. "Let's go." They sprinted back to the shed, passengers watching them from the windows like silent shadows. The sky had begun to darken again, not from storm clouds, but from the slow fall of evening. Time was slipping away. Inside the shed, she wiped dust off the floor and set the radio down. The co-pilot handed her the power pack. She examined the ports. "The connectors don't match. We need a way to link them." He ran a hand through his hair. "What can we use?" She scanned the shed again and spotted the broken chair in the corner. Its seat had metal brackets and wiring, probably part of an old headset holder. She rushed to it, snapped off a thin piece of copper wiring, and held it up. "This should work." The co-pilot stared at her like she had just performed a magic trick. "You know how to do all this?" She didn't answer directly. "I know how to survive problems my father used to throw at me." She stripped the wire ends, twisted them between the power pack and the radio's battery terminals, and taped them with a piece she tore from the inside of the radio panel. "Crude, but stable. Try now," she said. The co-pilot turned the crank. Again, slowly the radio flickered. A small hum rose from inside. A faint glow appeared on the screen, then a clear beep. Her heart jumped. The co-pilot leaned into the microphone. "This is Flight 613, emergency landing. We need medical evacuation. Captain unconscious, fuel critical. Coordinates static." Roared suddenly. The student's breath caught. "No, please. Not again." The co-pilot adjusted the dials with shaking fingers, voice rising. "Flight 613 requesting immediate." Then, through the static, a voice broke through, stronger now. "Flight 613, we hear you. Medical team dispatched. ET at 20 minutes. Hold position." The student let out a breath that almost became a cry. The co-pilot closed his eyes briefly, relief shaking through him. They grabbed the radio and ran back to the plane. Passengers saw their faces and knew Help was coming. Inside the cockpit, the flight attendant checked the captain again. His pulse is weak but steady. He just needs medical care. The student knelt beside the captain and touched the edge of his arm gently. Hold on, they're coming. Minutes dragged by, but this time the silence wasn't full of fear, it was full of hope. 20 minutes later, the sound of an approaching helicopter broke the air. Its blades cut through the sky as it descended toward the runway. Passengers pressed against windows, watching with trembling relief. The medical team landed quickly and rushed into the aircraft. They worked fast, lifting the captain onto a stretcher, checking vital signs, connecting equipment. One medic looked at the student and co-pilot. You two kept him alive long enough. Good work, the co-pilot nodded, exhausted. The student simply lowered her eyes, humbled. As the captain was lifted into the helicopter, passengers clapped slowly at first, then louder. The co-pilot tried to wave them off, insisting he only did his duty. But the applause shifted. It aimed at her. The quiet college student from seat 14A. Some passengers cried. Some reached for her hand. One woman whispered, "You saved us." It felt strange to hear. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had done what she could with the knowledge she had. At the moment it mattered most. When the helicopter lifted away, the co-pilot stepped beside her. You know, he said softly, if you ever wanted to become a pilot, the world could use someone like you. She looked at the sky, the fading light brushing the horizon. I didn't think I had it in me, she said quietly. You always did, he replied. You just never had a moment big enough to show it. She smiled faintly. Maybe seat 14A was never meant to be an ordinary seat. Maybe it was the place where a quiet student finally discovered how much power she had inside her.